This video dips into the Norwich Lanes, looking at Bedford Street in yellow, St Andrew's Hill in green. Although Bedford Street is named after the Bedford Arms, which we'll see later, it was originally part of Pottergate, seen in red, before Exchange Street, which was originally Post Office Street, shown in blue, split the two. Looking from Exchange Street, the first building on the left of Bedford Street, now part of Jarrell's, was the Corn Exchange Vaults pub for a relatively brief period at the end of the 19th century. Beyond that we can just see School Lane, where the drain pipe can be seen. But where and what was the school? If we take a brief detour into School Lane and look right at the end, we can see the back of the telephone exchange, which was the site of the Model School for Girls from 1708 until 1929. School Lane is shown in green, with the school and logically an access shown in blue. Number 5 Bedford Street, seen in 1987 as Clement Jocelyn, had previously been Daniels and Chapman and Pape and is now Jarrell's. At number 7 was the French Horn pub, seen here in the early 1900s, which would be renamed the True Comrades in 1922 before closing in 1949. It's now Galleons. Opposite Galleons, this is the current view, compared to the 1986 equivalent. Looking back at this view, we can see Jarrell's in the distance, and here it is being built in 1965. Before that, it was a site of the Corn Exchange, which gave Exchange Street its name. Looking away from Exchange Street on the left hand side at number 13, this was the Bedford Arms in 1968. It closed in 1975 and is now in Grave It Now. On the other side of the street, this was Butcher's Draper's Shop in 2000, which is now a branch of Turtle Bay. Beyond the Swan Lane junction is Scott & Co Beauty Salon, which in 1938 had been a branch of Stead & Simpson's Shoe Shop. This is number 15 in 2023, looking back towards Exchange Street. This is 1988, and this is the equivalent view in 1936. Behind this locked door is Websdale's Court, seen here in 1998 and here in 1990. Frank's Bar had just closed at the time I made this video. We'll come back to that later, and meanwhile here is the equivalent 1936 view. Next to Frank's Bar is Old Post Office Yard, and looking over the wall at the end is this building, which was part of the girls' school mentioned earlier. I believe this was also the old post office. It certainly was at one time a post office museum. Let's have a brief look around Old Post Office Yard itself, comparing images from 1936 with equivalent views from 2023. Back on Bedford Street and looking northeast, the historic comparison this time is from 1975. This photo from the 1890s is titled Nelson Tavern, which had been on the site of Frank's Bar, but I think it may be the Stanley Arms, which was on the western corner of Bridewell Alley, and if so, this is the 1972 equivalent, with this being 2023. This site was hovels from 1864 until 2003, is seen here in 1955 and here in 1936. This is the Wild Man pub, thought to commemorate Peter the Wild Boy, kept by King George I as a curiosity, but briefly imprisoned in the nearby Bridewell. Sadly, I could find no old photos of the pub, but this was its sign in 2002. On the opposite side of the street, this is number 18, with the historic equivalent view dating from 1998. And now we move from Bedford Street to St Andrew's Hill. The street was named in 1845 after the church at the bottom. It was known as Blackfriars Street in the mid-1700s. It was also called Seven Steps or St Andrew's Steps, though these steps were removed in 1761. On the right, this was number 1 and 1A in 1936. Before 1893, it had been the London Tavern, and before that it was the St Andrew's Steps. This is the current view. This is the current view of numbers 2 to 4, and this is 1936. Coleman's Printers and Engravers had been in this location since 1860, relocating in the 1980s to Rowntree Way. This doorway, part of number 6 and seen here in 1935, dates from 1490 and was the former entrance to the Bridewell prison. These are numbers 8 to 10 in 1938 and 2023, and across the street this is number 5. The site looked like this back in 1936. For number 12 we need to look back up the hill, and this is the 1938 equivalent of that. Turn around and on the other side this is part of Suckling House in 1937, together with the current view with obligatory bin, and looking back up at it in 1936 looks like this, and like this in 2023. Looking towards the bottom of the hill from St Andrew Street, St Andrew's Church is on the right, and before 1900 at the bottom of the hill was the City Arms pub, demolished to give access for trams. Finally, back to Frank's Bar, which we saw earlier. You might like to pause the video and read its love letter to Norwich as it closed in 2023.